Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked. Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us. Jason is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. Captain John Regan is with us, and if you'd like to call us, we'll pay for the call, 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. Telephone listen line, 605-477-3249. 605-477-3249. Welcome, Captain John Regan.
Good morning, Vincent.
Hey, John, I just need like 2 minutes very quickly. December 7th, 1941, the Japanese attacked the United States at Pearl Harbor. Their code word was Tora, Tora, Tora. That means lightning attack. Well, here we go. So, in the United States Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, there are 3 representatives who want to steal your wealth. They want to tax you $10 per firearm per year. So if you have 10 guns, whether it be rifle, pistol, shotgun, count them up. If there are 10 of them, that's 10 times $10 each year, $100 per year, $1,000 for 10 years. And if you don't, you will be a criminal. Okay? So who are these turkeys? Their names are Mary Louise Isaacson, and I'm going to give you her phone number. Representative Angel Cruz of Philadelphia. Representative Mary Jo Daley of Conshohocken, Pennsylvania. So here are their phone numbers. For Mary Louise Isaacson, 215-503-3245. 215-503-3245. Angel Cruz, 215-291-5643. 215-291-5643. And Mary Jo Daley, 610-832-1679. 610-832-1679. These turkeys, posing as alleged representatives, want to tax you. They want you to register your guns, and if you don't, you will be a criminal. If you handle a gun in Pennsylvania that has not been registered, you will be a criminal. You need to call these people and tell them whatever you think now, because it's going to spread like wildfire. Even if you are not in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, this will affect you. This is a call to action. I'm not kidding. And now that the website's up, I can now post their names and addresses and phone numbers and the article that says that they want to register. They want you to register your guns. Number 1 is register them. Number 2 is steal them from you. They tried it in Missouri, and we whipped them because we gave out their phone numbers, and you called. It's time to do it again. Teach them another lesson. Captain John Regan?
Well, it's not often that I shock myself with writing my own article, but that happened this morning. And I have this posted on the financialstateoftheunion.com. It's called Equal Pay Now, Part 1. And I think it was kind of a coincidence that at the top of the hour news, it talked about how President Trump is donating his salary. And that kind of just dovetails into what I'm talking about with this equal pay now. Because after all, what can be fairer than equal pay? Isn't that what everybody's clamoring for? So I think it's fair we look at what does equal pay look like, talk a little bit about how this can easily be done with a simplified tax code, and even get into what can be done until laws are changed. And I know we've talked a lot about what's happened since the downturn in 2008. And, a lot of people out there are hurting. And, especially on the Democrat side, we're seeing a lot of, campaigning going on already, thoughts about what's good. So until Congress passes legislation to create a Department of Fairness, there's actually quite a bit that we can do to achieve equal pay. Well, first off, what would equal pay look like? Well, that information gets reported to the government, and the Social Security Administration produces an annual report with these wage statistics. The most recent report is for 2017, and the numbers I'm using today come from that report. The 2018 report is due in October, and I've provided a link where you can take a look at that report for yourself. Bottom line, we had 165,438,239 workers, making an average of $48,251.57. That works out to roughly $4,020 per month, or $928 per week. And of course, that's before taxes, Social Security, and Medicare deductions. One of the things it provides is how this breaks out by range, and they were nice enough to tell us exactly what percent of workers make less than this average amount, which happens to be 67.4%, which is just a little over 2/3. So how do we get people making more money? Of course, getting jobs with higher pay is a way. So what I did is I pulled an article that I had that shows the 25 highest paying jobs in America. And there's a link to that article as well. And in this article, it says how many job openings are available for these 25 highest paying jobs. And it turns out when you add all that together, it's less than 60,000. So for the 165 million that's not in these, means there's a problem trying to get people into that higher category. So it seems like the only fair thing to do is have every worker earn $48,251.57. And since everybody would make the same amount of pay, this would simplify taxes. Rather than multiple deductions for your income taxes, Social Security, and Medicare, why don't we just make it one deduction to pay for all levels of government? That way, you don't have to do multiple filings. You wouldn't have to worry about sales tax or property tax, any of that stuff. So what would that take? And for this, went over to the U.S. debt clock and see that government spending for federal, state, and local is currently running a bit over $7 trillion. And for the discussion purposes today, I just, rounded that at $7 trillion divided by the number of workers. That works out to $42,311.86 per worker. Well, this is the part that kind of shocked me a bit. After paying for government, every worker would equally be left with $5,900 $39.71, which works out to $495 a month or $114 per week. So until we have the Department of Fairness, we'll just have to settle for the current taxing structure, even if that means more debt for a while. And one of the things that we can do in the meantime, and we've had people like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett saying how they haven't been paying enough in taxes. Well, they don't have to wait for a change in the law. There's an easy fix. All they have to do is write a check to the government, and I've got a link right here in the article with the instructions on how you send this gift into the government. And just so we don't run into the break with this, I'll go ahead and pause here so that you can make your observations.
I'm sorry, you said pause for what, John?
So you can make your observations.
Oh, well, it's always been the case that you can give money to the government. You can gift money to the government. Except why would anybody do that? Because, I'm talking about the bottom 93%, us. Why would we do that? Because we can hardly make it go now. And I'm thinking about this number that you said, for $48,000 would be the, let's see, I go right to the number, $48,251. I'd love to make that. Farmers would love to make that. That'd be wonderful if we could make almost $50,000 a year. But we can't. Farmers are killing themselves, literally taking their lives because they can't make it go. They're in debt. They bought some machines that they needed or thought they needed, and they can't pay for them. So they're committing suicide. That's what's happening. That's what happened during the first Great Depression. It's happening now. People are in financial distress. And what we really need to do, if you read between the lines of what you said, John, the government's out of control. The spending is out of control. We can't pay the debt. And what the government solution is to spend more money. Isn't that called Keynesian economics? Not working so well. As a matter of fact, the chief economist for the Clinton and Barry Soetoro administrations committed suicide. Maybe it's because he figured out that he's been lying to us for so long, it's finally caught up with him and he can't stand it anymore because he's plunged the country into almost financial ruin. And that's coming shortly. We'll be right back. Alan Kruger was the economic advisor to the Clinton and Soetoro regimes. Captain John Regan, please continue.
So, like we've talked about, Trump has already donated his salary, not just down to the $48,251 level. So he's really led the way, and there are so many other people that can step up and do their patriotic duty to help have fair pay for the other 2/3 of workers in America. And I think Congress is at the top of that list. I think it's only fair and patriotic to reduce their pay to $48,251.57. As Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi makes the most at $223,500, so she could donate $175,248.43. Most senators and representatives make $174,000, so they can donate $124,748.43 to support fairness. And I really think those socialist champions, Bernie Sanders and AOC, being the leaders of this, should do this immediately to show their support for the workers of America. And why stop there? The other government workers at all levels should do the same because, that's just what patriots do. Beyond that, imagine if we had all these union workers and leaders making their patriotic fair share of the 48,000. Think of all the patriotic professors and college coaches taking only their fair share. You know, in some states, the highest paid, public employee is not the governor. It's a college coach, and they can be making over $1 million a year. So reducing that cost could make college education more affordable. And talking about athletics, think about all the patriotic professional athletes only taking their fair share. This would allow for lower ticket prices, too, where ordinary people could afford to go back to the game again. Think of all of the patriotic performers earning their fair share, making movies and concerts more affordable where you could go more often. How about all the patriotic media members working for their fair share? And that would make news more affordable. How about all the patriotic medical staff, lawyers, and tech workers accepting only their fair share, making these services more affordable? So it wouldn't take much for the 1/3 of workers doing their patriotic duty, allowing the other 2/3 to make their fair share. While contracts are being changed, Congress could change the tax code to collect all income over $928 a week, which then could be passed on during the tax filing process to give the 2/3 people their fair pay. And that is what equal pay looks like. And I know that's not everything. We can't cover it all in one sitting, because there's other income out there, business income, investment income, retirement income. And then there's the question, what about children? What about people that can't work? Well, that's going to be in part 2. But in the meantime, why don't we have Congress start the ball rolling and reduce their pay to $48,251.51. What do you say, Vincent?
Well, I'm looking at some of the incomes of the actors. So, for example, Jennifer Aniston. Just moved. Okay. Jennifer Aniston, $25.5 million. Emma Stone, $26 million. Ryan Reynolds, $21 million. Then you get to Tom Cruise, $43 million. Vin Diesel, $54.5 million. Adam Sandler, he's not even funny, $50.5 million. Mark Wahlberg, $68 million. Then you get to, let's see, it just keeps moving. The page keeps moving on me. But they make a lot. I think they could scale down some of their mansions. Captain John Reagan's with us. Captain John Reagan, I've never said this, but it's about time I do. Back in 1980, I founded a company that manufactured, let me say it a different way, manufactured in the United States satellite communications receivers. And there was a publication, there were 2 industry publications. One was called Orbit. It was like satellite industry news and programming, and another one called Channel Guide. Channel Guide was like TV Guide for satellite television. And in 1980, there was an issue of Satellite TV Guide, Channel Guide, and on the front page there was a picture of me and my 2 business partners. In the middle of the newspaper was an article about a guy named Charlie Ergen. I just looked up the Forbes top most wealthy people. Charlie Ergen is number 44. He was in the same issue as I was in. And Charlie Ergen was the co-founder and chairman of a company called EchoStar. The new name is Dish Network. Charlie Ergen is worth $10.8 billion as of 2018. He didn't even have a product. He was selling a service. And he launched that to become a billionaire. I'm not complaining that he can, buy and sell me multiple times over. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is these people have so much money that they could actually afford to pay more, no question about it. However, I think the big problem is not so much that as it is that the government is spending us into oblivion and we just can't afford the government. Your take on that, John Regan?
Well, one of the reasons I put this together is because there's a lot of people out there saying that we need more equality and fairness. So I want people to know exactly what they're voting for. And this gives the first installment on that. But keep in mind when I put that in there about government spending, that does not include the unfunded liabilities of Social Security, Medicare, and pension plans. And that's one of the things that I'll be doing in one of the upcoming pieces. I don't know how many parts this is going to end up being because it's not something you can just write one little article on. It has several pieces to the puzzle. But I can guarantee you by the time we add in just the amounts it would take to keep Social Security, Medicare, and pension plans from going deeper in the hole, that we're going to need well over 100% of income to pay for it. And that's kind of been my point with the Financial State of the Union going back 7 years ago to the first time I was on air with you, is that we can't fix the situation we're in. And it's going to get ugly. It's a situation that we have never seen before in history. It's never been like this. We can use history as a guideline, such as the Great Depression, but things are different from how things were then. And we're going to see what that looks like much sooner than people realize. Recently, I talked about how by 2025, we should see where the government, the federal government, would have to borrow money just to pay interest on the federal debt. That's where you know you have problems, when you have to borrow money just to pay interest. So whoever is elected president in 2020 can't stop what's happening, but they will have a big effect on how that affects our lives. And as those 4 years, the next administration evolve, we're going to see the deficits get deeper and deeper. We're going to see the cost of the debt go up and up. And the choice is they either cut spending, which we have not seen government able to do, or they have to pile on the debt even faster to make up for that shortfall. Sooner or later, we hit that point where there's just no more give in the system, even with their magic money trick, MMT, they call modern money theory, where they just print money. They believe they can do so without consequences. It's not going to work. It's possible that trick might buy a few more months, but it can certainly not, get us even another several years down the road. And I think that's, part of what we're here for is what do we do? We can't escape this. And one of the big lessons from the Great Depression is you really need to be in a position to raise some or all of your own food. And back then, my mother was born in Kansas City. So, she lived in a metro area. However, there were family members in Kansas, I believe it was, that were on a farm, and like many people during the Depression, they moved in with family members on a farm so that they could have food. Nowadays, there aren't very many people living on a farm. And even those that do have farms, often it's this monoculture where they're raising, wheat or corn or soybeans. There's just not enough, family that are farmers. I don't know of any in our extended family that qualify for that. So it's going to make these coming times very interesting. Vincent?
As you mentioned that, I was thinking, how many people on my side of the family versus Mrs. Finelli's side of the family are farmers? Just us. Just us. Everyone else is doing what, the average Joe does. They live in cities, they live in the suburbs, they enter data, they sit behind keyboards, but no one is really, we've got one lawyer who I'm ashamed of, but we're the only ones that are actually doing something to provide for other people, raising beef cows. We're the only farmers. And I got to tell you, I don't see many people wanting to be farmers. Young people, it's too hard. If they're raised in a farming family, other than my children, our children, I should say, most of the people who have children that were raised on a farm are thinking, there's got to be a better way. You can make more money, working at a factory. You can make more money someplace else. You can make more money behind a keyboard. And they're looking to get out because it's too hard. You get in the tractor and it's freezing cold, and rain's landing on you, unless you're fortunate enough to be able to afford a tractor with a cab on it. It's cold. It's hot. It's windy. It's dusty. And I understand why some people don't want to do it. For me, it's a passion. I love doing it. I love the challenge. But I'm not saying it's easy. It's 24 hours a day. It's laying awake at night thinking about better ways of making this thing work. It flat out is tough. And, people call the farmhouse, and I probably need to apologize for this. People call the farmhouse, and I get these messages on our answering machine. And they think that they can pick up the phone and call me and I'll be here. Well, that's not the case. I'm working. I'm literally working. I do not carry a personal tracking and interruption device with me. I don't do that. When I'm working, I don't want to be interrupted. I'm working. I'm working because when I am farming, I want 100% of my attention on what I'm doing so I don't get hurt. And I expect that of everybody who's working here at the farm. Mrs. Finelli, our children, they need to pay attention to what they're doing. It's dangerous. Another reason why people don't necessarily want to be farmers. And this average salary in the USA, $48,251, that'd be nice. But it's not happening. It's not happening. I think the average salary around our neck of the woods is about half of that. And that's why farmers are going under. They can't even pay their taxes. But at the same token, they're not challenging the big, bad, ugly machine. They're not saying, wait a minute, I'm going to challenge the amount that you're trying to tell me I owe for taxes, personal property taxes. Now, I do it all the time. And I can't get other people to do it. John, I think that's one thing we need to do. We need to gum up the works. We need to go John Galt. We need to pull our efforts out of the big machine and gum it up every way we can. That's why I called for Torah this morning, first thing. We need to be on the attack. We don't need to be subservient. These people work for us. And there are too many of them. And we're paying them too much. And the sheriffs and their deputies, when they arrest somebody and they take their property and they call it evidence, they put it in an evidence locker, nobody can find it. 10 years later, they have a fire sale. They have an auction. And they sell stolen property. Property the government corporation, has stolen from we the villagers. And they keep the money. It's not their property. Class, don't allow that to happen. Challenge them. Make noise. Speak up. Don't be a pansy. Captain John Regan's with us, thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. Captain John Regan, gasoline prices up 10% in the last 2 weeks. Food prices keep going up, up, up. Food quality is going down, down, down. Durability on products is going down, down, down. And the cost of maintaining everything is going up. The people in the bottom 93%, which I am one, are feeling the pinch. And I am calling for people who are outraged to speak up and speak out. Any comments? What do you think?
That's just part of what we're going to be seeing more and more of. And let me try and fit this in. You were talking about farmers not making money, plus there's the issue of so many of them are older and there's not the young people filling in. We're seeing similar things. There's not enough doctors, truckers, pilots, military. And what we're going to see is more and more of these occupations being replaced with artificial intelligence and robotics. And this also ties into the upcoming 5G rollout. Because right now, if you're in rural America, you don't have to worry too much about a lot of electromagnetic frequencies hitting you. But this 5G rollout is going everywhere, including the farm, because they plan on using all this tech for agriculture. It's one of the reasons why I'm looking at, if possible, getting out of the country, because there's not going to be any place in the United States that's not going to have coverage, and eventually they're going to have this coverage worldwide, even if they do it from some kind of aircraft to blanket every part of the surface of the earth. But they're going to do that sooner than later in the United States. Vincent?
Dane Wigington is going to be on with us in just a couple minutes, and that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about, the combination of 5G and the aerosol spraying the metals in the air to be used to control us with 5G programming. I'm very concerned about that. I don't know anyone who doesn't have sickness and death in their families. I'm talking about cancers. I'm talking about all kinds of awful, horrible diseases that people have in their families. And frankly, we didn't have all this when I was growing up. Cancer was rare. Now it's everywhere. It's in every family. John, I'm very concerned about 5G. I think that what's going to happen is when people finally wake up, I believe that there's going to be a shooting civil war. I believe it's coming. I really, honestly believe that the shooting is going to start. I don't know when. Of course, I'm not advocating it, but I believe it is coming our way. And I don't think that there's going to be much that we can do to stop it because of the inequalities that you've been talking about, the greed, the stupidity. You put all that together, the arrogance, this 5G, it's not necessary. And why would anybody say, well, I got to have a faster phone? Really? How much are you doing with that phone? How much are you really doing? Are you actually doing anything productive with that phone? Or is it just something that, like a disease that you can't shake? I think it's a disease people can't shake. I don't want people...
You don't need the 5G so you can download a full-length movie in a matter of seconds. You have to have the 5G for the massive amount of data that these artificial intelligence and surveillance systems require.
Right. And what I'm trying to say is people think that 5G is going to be wonderful and their lives are going to get better. They're going to get worse. Absolutely worse. Everywhere you go, you will be monitored. The banks are doing it. The credit card companies are doing it. The GPS in your phone is doing it. You're being monitored on your computer, what you think, what you say. Even if you use emojis, you know, and you put a smiley face or a frowny face or whatever you do to illustrate how you feel, that is being tracked. And the sensors in these smart devices are looking at your homes. They're looking at the kind of clothes that you're wearing to determine your income level based on how you dress and how you speak. And if you think that the government is interested in protecting D's, Does, and Dem guys, I think you ought to think about that again. Captain John Regan, I really appreciate you being with us and scaring the pants off us as you always do. And I hope that people actually pay attention and wake up and share what they've learned here at USA Prepares. It's true. What we're saying is true. Captain John Regan, thank you so much. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Dane Wigington is with us. geoengineeringwatch.org. Welcome, amigo.
Thank you, Vincent. Thank you for your willingness to try to bring this issue to the light of day. If we don't deal with this issue, nothing else will matter. Climate
Dane, climate change is right before our eyes. We can't miss it. You and I talked on the phone privately, and I mentioned that we had some snow and ice here in Missouri, and it was different from when I was a child. When I was a child, we used to go out and run and play in the snow and in the ice, and it was fine. Not anymore. The ice is so slippery. It's like ice with oil on it. What's going on?
One of the elements that are in what's termed its patented processes of chemical ice nucleation for weather modification. Some of those patents can be found at geoengineeringwatch.org. What that means, Vincent, is that the climate engineers can and are chemically nucleating cloud moisture to produce frozen precipitation, i.e. snow, ice storms, out of what should have been liquid precipitation. And for those that doubt that this can be done, I would encourage them, 1, to look at the patents, 2, to search Chinese scientists create artificial snowstorm. They'll find that Fox News and Popular Science covered that till the Chinese government did $1 billion worth of damage to Beijing. Then they went more under the radar with these processes. But anyone who thinks that the Chinese government can and is doing this and our government isn't is not looking very clearly at reality. So this is engineering winter, Vincent, and part of the elements in this are surfactants. Surfactants are what you have in soap as well. This is part of what we believe in, what shows in the materials manufacturing processes that we've found already from American Elements Corporation. Surfactants appear to be used to keep these particulates from coagulating or sticking together as they're dispersed. But, yes, it makes the snow unimaginably slick. It makes it behave in a very different fashion. A lot of the snow tends to sublimate, which means it goes from a solid to a gas, bypassing liquid phase. You don't have, in some cases, as much runoff, although, where there's so much of it now, we do see a lot of runoff. But it melts at higher temperatures. They can make it snow. We've recorded snowfall at temperatures pushing 50 degrees. As this process continues, it creates a cold insulator of air that sits on the surface, just like you have it, Vincent, in your market. You have a freezer with no top on it, an open top, because the cold air just sits in there because it's heavier. So they can cool the temperatures down at the surface. They can create the illusion of cold, and even, it is cold at the surface, record cold, a very unnaturally feeling cold. But this is skewing people's perception of the true state of planetary meltdown. And the paradox is, Vincent, and I'll leave it at this, every single engineered winter event they create further fuels the overall planetary meltdown.
Mm-hmm.
Vincent.
Dane, we had, just as an example, if people don't think that what we're saying is true, we had an example of this. We've had some snow in Missouri and across the Midwest, and there was a massive crash, about 70 vehicles. Bang, 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 one into the next, into the next. They could not stop. They just slid into each other. I watched the video over and over, and it seemed like these were probably people who could drive somewhat on snow and ice, but it was so slippery they couldn't stop. And then when the first one stopped, there was a chain reaction. and I'm seeing more and more of this. I saw a video of a tractor trailer recently just traveling down the highway. A gust of wind blew the tractor trailer over onto its side. It's not like he was trying to make a quick turn. He was just going down the highway, boom, on his side. These kinds of things are happening more and more. Shingles are blowing off our roof. Never happened before. They're blowing off our roof.
Well,
go ahead.
You certainly have, I mean, for those, some people would argue that, we've always had windstorms and we've always had snowstorms. But the fact of the matter is we have statistics on certain elements of the weather and climate system, i.e. global dimming. That's a scientific term. What does that mean? It means how much of the sun's direct rays no longer reach the surface of the planet as compared to 5+ decades ago. The figures range from 20 to 30%. This is what got me into this battle, Vincent. It's because my background is solar. My home is completely off-grid. Was the cover of the world's largest renewable energy magazine. And I was losing extraordinary amounts of my solar uptake from whatever aircraft were emitting that was blocking the entire horizon on some days. I was losing 60, 70% of my solar uptake. Clearly, that is not condensation. So in my research and ferreting out the elements listed in climate engineering patents, starting with aluminum, barium, other elements, began to test my precipitation, which is an indicator of what is in the air column, found these elements. The amounts continued to escalate as the solar obscuration, the blocking of the sky, continued to escalate, and that is the express goal of climate engineering, solar radiation management, to block the sun's incoming thermal energy. So they can and are creating short-term, highly toxic cool-down events, but at the cost, again, of a worsened overall warming. And Vincent, this is the same mentality of the pharmaceutical industrial complex. When again, the commercials we see now for the latest pharmaceutical, and they list the side effects, and you wonder who in the world would take that. But it's the same mentality. Try to treat the symptom while causing side effects that are exponentially worse. Vincent.
Dane, you just dropped out. It's really interesting how I can watch the traffic, the communications between the studio here in Missouri and the network. And when we start talking about things that are right over the target, we get blocked out. I can see it happening. Dane, why is it that these planes that are, well, I would say they're terrorists, these people flying these planes and the people to tell them to fly the planes are terrorists. Why is it that these planes have not been shot down over the United States?
Who would shoot them down? Our military.
That's the question.
Our military, who's the single largest participant in the climate engineering insanity. So this is what people need to understand. This is not some other country. This is our own country. And it's not just our country doing it. We have 800-page congressional documents. This can be found at geoengineeringwatch.org. If your listeners search geoengineeringwatch.org, massive Senate document, and they may not find it on Google. Google has recently deleted our site in spite of the fact that we have the 33 million visitors and the highest-ranked site on the subject of geoengineering. Our site's been banned from that a search of the geoengineering term, but you can still find our site if you search geoengineeringwatch.org, our whole site, and search massive Senate document that outlines participation of countries around the globe that even normally adversarial countries, i.e. China, Russia, U.S., will participate and cooperate on the climate engineering issue because of the cross-border ramifications. They are all doing it, either participating either actively or passively. Which countries aren't participating? We know Iran's not participating. So is it any wonder that they're being demonized? They don't want to use the dollar anymore. They're being demonized for that as well. So you see countries like that in the crosshairs when, in fact, Iran hasn't invaded any other country for almost 230 years. They're being demonized for many reasons, and perhaps their lack of willingness to participate in the climate engineering insanity is one of those reasons. But we have the U.S. military being told, certainly, that they are participating in some benevolent planet-saving operation. Could not be further from the truth. And this is where, Vincent, we need our U.S. military brothers and sisters to wake up and investigate and find out what they're actually participating in. And I would give Agent Orange as an example, where pilots U.S. military pilots, were they told that what they were spraying would kill their comrades on the ground? Of course not. Of course not. And it's the same scenario now. But we need the mindless order following to end. It needs to end. And although we've been horrible stewards of our planet, I don't think any rational person could argue that, the climate engineering operations are the single greatest assault against the entire web of life, contaminating every breath we take. And what people don't realize, Vincent, is how short our time horizon is on the current course. People still think trouble's centuries off or perhaps decades off. Not true. It's here. In fact, a couple statistics to drive this point home. On the current rate of ozone layer destruction, we're working with a former NASA contract engineer. We supplied his metering equipment to him, and we're getting UVC on the ground. That's the last band of UV radiation before X-ray. And many sources of ozone destruction, but climate engineering the largest single source. On the current rate of destruction, mathematically speaking, it looks like 2025 or 2026, total ozone layer collapse, game over for the human race and terrestrial life on Earth. Now, the current rate of die-off, let's look at current statistics of wildlife die-off. We've lost 60% of Earth's wildlife populations in the last 40 years. At the current rate of die-off, if that rate does not accelerate, and it is, the 0 hour, mathematically, for no wildlife left on planet Earth, 2026. So the bottom line is, we're free-falling into total global extinction, and I don't care who doesn't believe that. It doesn't matter to me. It's not I can't make anybody believe statistics. That's up to them to investigate. But the power structure is doing everything in its ability to mask this from the U.S. population, most specifically, such as importing $41 billion plus worth of food from countries that are starving to death to keep our store shelves stocked, to keep the American public pacified until the last possible moment, which is not far off if we stay on this course.
Okay, Dane, here's a connected dot piece of information. Class, go to the food store, your favorite food store, and look at the aisles. Look, have the aisles gotten wider? The answer is yes. Have the shelves gotten lower? The answer is yes. Have the choices gotten fewer? The answer is yes. Why is that? Because we have a food production problem. Why is it that Aldi, the discount food store, is selling imported Chinese junk where they used to sell food? 1/5 of the store is now Chinese junk where they used to sell food because we're having trouble making food. The floods in the Midwest. Let's talk about that when we come back, Dane, from this break. The floods in the Midwest. Is that because of geoengineering? Those floods have caused the water that we drink, the potable water, to be contaminated. Now the drinking water is not safe in many areas of the Midwest. Class, Dane Wigington is with us, geoengineeringwatch.org. We're talking about global extinction 2026. Dane, drinking water is contaminated right now in Nebraska, Iowa, and Wisconsin due to the massive flooding. Cows have gone to the high ground. It's tough to feed them. There are people being rescued by helicopters. This is a big problem. Has this been caused by geoengineering?
Here's what we can say with certainty. There is no natural weather at this point. How can we say that with certainty? Because we can see with satellite imagery that the entire global climate system is being disrupted. We look at satellite imagery every single day from all over the globe. When you disrupt any part of the system, you disrupt the entire system. But what we see is the entire system being systematically intervened with all over the globe. We can see no natural formations, cyclonic rotations. Even the bomb cyclone, Vincent, that you probably saw the headlines on, that just was part of the latest engineered winter event, that we know ionosphere heaters like HAARP. Your listeners don't know what HAARP is. It's a massively powerful ground-based microwave transmission facility in Alaska, and there are about 100 of these around the globe, the larger ground-based facilities. They can heat the electrically charged ionosphere by causing an electrical chain reaction, heat it to extraordinarily high temperatures, and that causes the atmosphere to rise, and they can thus create pressure zones or augment existing pressure zones, as we just saw with this bomb cyclone. And we can see the hand of the climate engineers on virtually every weather system we see. For example, let's look at the well, first of all, your listeners can go back to this particular event that just happened, this bomb cyclone. At geoengineeringwatch.org, we recorded the animations showing the ground-based localized radio frequency transmissions manipulating that moisture, period. They can look at the recorded animations of the energizing of these ground-based facilities that manipulate that moisture. It's a video on geoengineeringwatch.org we posted Thursday of last week, I believe. So they can see the actual part of the weather manipulation operations taking place. In regards to systems like, let's take Hurricane Harvey, for example. How in the world could the, quote, weather forecasters know a week in advance that that cyclone was going to park in place and create unprecedented precipitation in one spot? Because it's not the prediction that they're giving. They're giving the scheduled weather, which we know, and I'm not speculating on that either. We know from our legal team's lawsuit against the U.S. Department of Commerce, who is the overseeing agency for NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, who was not giving us our Freedom of Information Act request initially till we sued the DOC. And we know from the FOIAs we've already received that virtually a script is being passed down to the local meteorologist level, a script that's being created by those who engineer the weather. At the top is Raytheon, doing all the weather modeling for National Weather Service and NOAA. So we have local forecasters literally reading the script. And in the case of Hurricane Harvey, we recorded that animation as well. If your listeners search geoengineeringwatch.org Hurricane Harvey, they can see with their own eyes the effect of these radio frequency transmissions on that cyclone, holding it in place, because these transmissions repel the particulates that are saturated in that storm in the atmosphere. By manipulating the particulates, they can manipulate the air mass. So, again, the video is worth 1,000 words, but the bottom line is weather warfare is being waged against U.S. populations. Our own government is involved. And in the case of our military members, again, certainly they are being told something entirely different. They are being told they're engaged in a planet-saving endeavor, which couldn't be further from the truth. So I'm not blaming everything on weather modification. Again, we have horrifically damaged the planet. But the intentional intervention in Earth's climate system, the most horrifically damaging of all, Vincent. And again, mathematically speaking, if we don't focus on salvaging Earth's remaining life support systems, starting with stopping the intentional climate intervention operations, game over in the very near-term horizon.
Dane Wigington, what is the relationship in your mind between 5G, the 5G rollout, and geoengineering, the spraying of our skies with metallic substances?
Well, the 5G is a horrific threat, as we all know, and I'm sure your listeners who are very up to speed know that that's a crowd control frequency. So it's a problem by itself. But I hear the break is coming on right now, but I'll explain after that the 5G transmissions are quite likely a part of the climate engineering operations as well. I'll elaborate after the break.
All right, we'll be right back. geoengineeringwatch.org with Dane Wigington. Dane, you were talking about the relationship between 5G and geoengineering, the spraying of our skies. Please continue.
If I could back up for 1 minute to explain part of the agenda that is certainly going on with climate engineering, because obviously people need to know if our government was involved in what amounts to weather warfare against our own populations, what would be the reasons why. And we can speculate on some of those reasons, but again, U.S. military members, those participating, certainly not given the bigger picture, all is compartmentalized. But Vincent, I sent you, I hope you got those, I sent you global departure from normal high temperature maps. What do those maps show? For about the last decade, the most anomalously less warm place in the entire world consistently is the eastern half of the North American continent, the most populated portions of the U.S. Now, that's not nature. Nature doesn't anomalously keep the most populated portions of one country cooler than the rest of the world for a decade, most consistently. So it's climate engineering, again, short-term toxic cool-downs at the cost of worsened overall warming, confusing and dividing the U.S. population as to the true state of global meltdown. Now, back to the electromagnetic frequencies, 5G, microwave transmissions. So these are known to be extremely dangerous, not just to us, but to all life forms. Methane, because the planet is warming, Vincent, methane is thawing and releasing into the atmosphere. I'm not just talking about livestock. Livestock is used to, again, polarize people, and blaming everything on cows is, obviously not the whole problem. And that's, again, used to divide populations. When I speak of methane, I'm talking about frozen methane deposits in the Earth's strata, methane hydrate and methane clathrate. So, Vincent, in the Bermuda Triangle, the ship sinkings for how many decades, we now know that's methane fields that were thawing and releasing on the seafloor, aerates the water like a bottle of champagne. Ships have no buoyancy. They go to the bottom intact. That methane, once it hits the sea surface, migrates into the atmosphere because it's lighter than air. So now we have massive methane thawing and deposits thawing and releasing. If your listeners searched Siberian methane craters, they would be shocked at the footage that they see, the photos they see. It looks like a massive nuclear war occurred. There's craters everywhere, like in the Yamal Peninsula in Siberia. Massive, circular, deep craters from methane thawing and exploding into the atmosphere. So back to the radio frequency transmissions like 5G, is it possible that some of these transmissions will be used for, there's two programs called Project Lucy and Project Alamo, those are acronyms, to use radio frequency microwave transmissions to try, in a desperate attempt, to degrade some of the atmospheric methane by blasting the atmosphere with opposing frequencies. Again, this is one layer of insanity heaped on top of another, like, back to the pharmaceutical industrial complex, Vincent. How many scenarios do you see where you take one pharmaceutical for one symptom when there's 20 side effects? Now you have to take 20 other pharmaceuticals to treat those, and the equation just continues. It's that type of insanity that's going on. So, yes, the radio frequency transmissions are used to manipulate the air masses, and the cell phone towers that we see now, in many cases, have a power service entrance that serves 10 times more power than they need for cell phone repeating, and we know that those towers, like NextRed towers, are being used for climate engineering because we can see their effect on precipitation maps. So there's so much to this equation, but the bottom line is none of it is benevolent. None of it is for the greater good. Ultimately, it's all about power and control and masking the severity of what's unfolding from populations until the brutal, bitter end.
Dane, we know that petitions don't work. It's like asking the king to stop beating, having his troops stop beating a person's wife. We know that petitions don't work. We know what does work, and that is visiting the homes of the perpetrators and saying, hello, just want to let you know we're here. We're very interested in what you're doing. We're watching what you're doing. Just wanted to say hello. That works. Whose homes do we visit?
Well, again, I do want to back that up, that, peaceful action is a necessity. When we see the protests that are occurring, which, by the way, the New Zealand shooting eclipsed the protests that were happening around the globe about the state of the biosphere. And unfortunately, some of those protests went violent, and that's the wrong direction. People need to keep it peaceful. We need to have the U.S. military on our side, or we have no chance, none. And as soon as those protests turn, towards violence, it alienates our military, and we can't allow that to happen. But bottom line is, if we look at the media, for example, and academia, both of whom are betraying not just the human race, but the entire web of life by perpetuating the lie that climate engineering, i.e. geoengineering, is just a proposal, which is an unimaginable lie. I mean, these programs have been going on for over 70 years. Anybody that's not clinically blind can look up and see them going on in the sky, and our deductive reasoning should tell us when we have a grid pattern one day and nothing the next, something is obviously going on. The data's there. So if with elected officials, media people who are perpetuating the power structures lie that this is not going on, academicians that are perpetuating the same lie, they can be emailed as well. But again, peacefully, non-threateningly, and I would suggest openly CCing as many other credible people as you can, citizens in their constituency, so forth, so that person you're emailing with credible data to point out that geoengineering is not a proposal, it's ongoing, why aren't you addressing that? So that as many people are part of that conversation as possible, so the people you're CCing realize that others are listening, that they will be certainly held accountable at some point by an awakened population for their actions. And one can only hope that Nuremberg-type trials will ensue for all those, Vincent, who are either actively or passively involved with these operations or their cover-up. And that list is large indeed. And the behavior of academia, their denial of this issue, and I know they're being threatened, by the way, so your listeners know, there is an illegal federal gag order on all National Weather Service and NOAA employees. Why would our government gag the weathermen if there wasn't something very, very big to hide? And I would argue that those in academia need to band together and stand up together and bring this issue out into the light of day while we still have something left to salvage of our planet. Our planet is being systematically wiped out. Climate engineering, the single greatest factor, again, and that's not to negate all the other factors. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that climate engineering is preventing the planet from responding on its own to the damage we've done to it. And mathematically speaking, Vincent, we're losing 200 to 300 species of plant, animal, and insect to extinction every single day. That's 1.5% of normal. 1.5% of normal. There's nothing normal about that. I can't express the gravity and immediacy of what's unfolding. We're in a fight for life right here, right now. And by the way, every breath we take is toxic. We know that from our lab tests all over the globe: aluminum, barium, strontium, manganese. If that's not a fight for life, what is?
Dane, you and I talked privately on the phone, and I mentioned that why is it that we can't seem to get through to the Trump administration? So, for example, what I mentioned to you is, why not contact Donald Trump's young son, Barron Trump, and let him know what is happening to the world that he will be in if he lives long enough. And I hope he does. I hope he has a long, healthy life. That we have polluted it. We are modifying the weather. We are causing these disasters. And maybe, Barron, you could tell your dad, President Donald Trump, that these things are happening and you're concerned about them, and you'd like your father to stop them tomorrow morning. Why can't we do that?
Well, certainly we can, and people should. But any notion that the current occupant of the White House doesn't know this is going on is a naive notion. And in January 2016, at a former U.S. Air Force Major General's home, whom I know, the top Trump campaign people and Carson campaign people were invited and attended a meeting specifically to address the climate engineering threat. They were given materials that were supplied by geoengineeringwatch.org. So we know they know. There's no question they know. And what do we see happening with climate engineering? Any slowdown? No. Exactly the opposite, a ramp up. And I would argue this, that any occupant of the White House, whether it's the current occupant or Obama or Clinton or any other occupant going all the way back to Kennedy, are simply playing their part in the play. They're power structure puppets. The last president to actually draw a line in the sand was Kennedy, and how long did he live after he did that? Not very long. So we need to get past that, and the power structure has very successfully used various occupants of the White House to maximize the division and polarization of the population. And now more so than ever, that's the case. And we need to get past that and realize it's all theater designed for mass distraction while the house burns down around us. That's exactly what's happening. And for those that don't believe things are that bad, in the coming weeks and months, they will reevaluate their opinion, because what's unfolding now can't be hidden much longer. And let me put this into perspective. I mentioned the methane. There's enough methane based on available data in the Laptev Sea of the Arctic alone, perhaps 10,000 gigatons of methane. If only 1/2 of 1% of that released, 1/200th, that would be a 400% increase in the total greenhouse gas forcing effect on the planet. So the bottom line is, if that field releases in any significant amount, this planet turns into Venus. And that's not a metaphor. If your listeners can search geoengineeringwatch.org Venus syndrome to learn more about that. People have been trained to believe there's some sort of magical thermostat in the planet. It will always find an equilibrium and always remain habitable. That's not reality. It's not reality. This planet is miraculous, but beyond real comprehension. its life support systems are so complex. It's unimaginable, truly. And we have treated it with unimaginable contempt. And climate engineering being at the top of that list. So the bottom line is I'm in this fight, Vincent, because this is the logical fight. This is the biggest hole in the bottom of the boat that if it's not taken care of, the whole boat goes down, nothing else matters. And as far as the climate engineers and what they control, if your listeners go to geoengineeringwatch.org, at the top toolbar, they can search sections on various critical subjects: engineering drought, engineering wildfires, engineering snow, engineering winter. They can learn much more by going through those sections.
Okay, we'll be right back. You mentioned the Nuremberg trials. I've got a comment and a question to follow up when we come back about the trials that I hope do happen, like the Nuremberg trials. Dane Wigington, geoengineeringwatch.org. At the end of World War II, the Nuremberg trials were held to determine the guilt or not guilt of the key players in World War II, those that committed war crimes. Most of those crimes were committed in Europe and Japan. Well, this is bigger than the Nuremberg trials. This is bigger than World War II. This is not just local to Europe and Japan. This involves the entire planet, everyone and everything. So I hope that we are keeping a list of who is involved so that those families can be brought to trial, like the Nuremberg trials. What do you think, Dane?
Well, I certainly hope we have enough time to carry out that type of pursuit of justice. And the desperation with what's occurring at this moment, again, to mask biosphere collapse from the population. And Vincent, we hear many people seemingly concerned about economic collapse. How much does economic collapse matter against the backdrop of biosphere implosion, where nothing matters? And if we look at circumstances, and I went over this in my weekly broadcast last week, the plane crash that just killed 22 UN officials that were on their way to a very important environmental meeting. And during the same time window, we have this headline: U.S. and Saudi Arabia blocking regulation of geoengineering, sources say. That's from multiple mainstream sources, that particular headline from the UK Guardian. Listen to that carefully again. U.S. and Saudi Arabia blocking regulation of geoengineering. Now, isn't that an interesting coincidence? And what might these UN officials that are now dead, what might they have contributed to that subject and that meeting? We can speculate again. We don't claim to know with certainty, but this was a very convenient, perhaps, plane crash. And regarding those in power at this point, and this is not a political issue, I want to state that very, very firmly. I've had personal meeting with now Governor Gavin Newsom at the Capitol with his top aide about this issue. Gavin Newsom certainly knows this is going on. California is being devastated. The single greatest source of single greatest causal factor for the wildfires is climate engineering, period. I'm not denying global warming. I'm not denying the planet's in meltdown, but climate engineering is disrupting the hydrological cycle. That's cutting off the rain to the forest. These materials I mentioned, starting with aluminum, is an incendiary dust. It ionizes the atmosphere, makes it more electrically conductive, creates more dry lightning, destroying the ozone layer. That's killing the trees from the top down. The toxic materials are killing the trees from the roots up. Again, the rain's being cut off. Climate engineering affecting all these factors. We can see that, verify that with satellite imagery. All this shown to Gavin Newsom. What has he done? Nothing. This is not a political issue. We're looking at two sides of the same coin. The political theater designed to distract the American population until there's nothing left. So the bottom line is, and again, back to recent events like the blocking of the regulation on geoengineering that was going to be discussed at this meeting, UN officials dead now, very conveniently. Here's a headline from Bloomberg to add to that. Piece found at Boeing 737 crash site shows jet was set to dive. What does that mean? Let's look at Paul Wellstone. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, Vincent, or your listeners. Plane crash that took out the senator and his whole family were the last stand-up legislators in our government kill this whole family. No, this is business as usual. So this is the big league. And again, climate engineering, Vincent, if the populations around the globe, because it's not just our government, I'm not focusing on our government, they're all involved with some exceptions, either actively or passively. But I would argue this. If we could expose this issue and populations around the globe understood what's been done to them without their knowledge or consent, I would argue a shockwave would ensue around the globe. The paradigm would be turned on its head. We need that to happen, and we need everybody to help us. Instructions are on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org.
Geoengineeringwatch.org. Class, here's the question to ask. Whenever there's a plane crash, the question to ask is who was on that plane, what did they know, and what were they going to expose?
Exactly.
Who was on the plane, what did they know, and what were they going to expose? Dane Wigington, I really appreciate your friendship. I really appreciate the time that you spent with us today. I really appreciate you ringing the alarm loud and clear. Class, it's up to you to take action from here. Geoengineeringwatch.org. Dane, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Vincent.